Today, our guest on the Yoga Therapy Hour is Susan Weis Bohlen, and she is delightful. Oh my goodness. And we're going to talk about two things that people don't talk about. One of them is our relationship with our body and weight, and basically how she lost 60 pounds and eventually even more, how she's keeping it off, living an Ayurvedic life. And this is the first time I've had someone talk about that on this podcast. So I'm really happy about this conversation. And then at the end, we get into a little bit of what is going on with the International Association of Yoga Therapists. As many of you know, there's a lot of conflict happening right now. And we get into her relationship with the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, NAMA, because she was on the board of NAMA and decided to leave. And a lot of what's going on, or what had gone on with NAMA, is very parallel to what we're seeing at International Association of Yoga Therapists. So you have to stay all the way to the end to hear all those juicy details. I need to tell you that in our podcast today, there are a few swear words and there is some discussion about sexuality and sex. So if you're listening with a little one that you don't want to hear that, please save this conversation for yourself at another time. All right, so let's get into the interview and let's go meet Susan. Welcome to the Yoga Therapy Hour podcast. We're so happy that you're on this journey with us, and we'd like to invite you to a few other activities. Number one, we have a Monday night yoga therapy clinic, and each month we choose a different topic. It's a deep time together, both professionally and personally, and we do offer CE units. So come join us on Monday nights if you will. We'll see you there, and until then, let's get into our podcast. Welcome to the Yoga Therapy Hour. Susan, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be with you, Amy. You're such a luminous person in the field of yoga and the whole wellness world. So I'm thrilled that you asked me to join you today.
Oh, yes, I'm happy to be here too. And look at you in your shining face with your yellow shirt, and it looks like yellow walls. You're just like a golden little egg sitting there.
It's going to be a little love fest, perhaps.
Yes, yes. Oh, Susan. So, we'll get at the end, that you are on the board of NAMA, National Ayurvedic Medical Association, that you have written 3 books and you have all sorts of offerings. So we'll get to that at the end of the show today. But I want to start with something that we've never talked about on this podcast. I think we're 160 or 170 episodes in. And it's the story of your relationship with your own being and your own body. Is that something you'd be willing to talk about? I think a lot of us
Yeah.
are on that same journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 61 years old. So if you don't start talking about that stuff now, I don't know when you do. Sure, sure.
I do research on all of you, and I was just reading. Here's what you wrote on your webpage, on your website. For as long as I can remember, I either felt I was overweight or I was overweight. I remember going to diet workshop and Weight Watchers in high school, trying to make peace with myself, struggling with bulimia for years, overcompensating in many ways, being a pleaser, being defensive, and not allowing people to get too close to me. Admitting I needed help in any way, being vulnerable in any way, I saw as being a failure. I was tough. I was funny. I was fiercely independent. I can do it. I was single with many boyfriends. So that's where I'd like to start.
Wow. I don't even remember writing most of that, but it's true. I like that. I was either overweight or overweight.
I was like, am I reading this correctly?
It's kind of cute how I wrote that. So, yeah. So, well, as I said, I'm 61, so I've had a really long time to look back on all of this. And I'm trying to make sense of who I was and why I was. And something I might have written on the website or not, I'm not sure, but I was bulimic for a long time too. Back and forth with bulimia. I always say I was not a great bulimic because I was never skinny. So it didn't
Mhm.
really work for whatever. I make light of these situations, and I realize for some people it's life or death, and it can be very, very serious. But somehow I overcame by the time I was in my bulimic. And at that point, I weighed about 237 pounds and 5'7". I think I carried it well. I think I was a beautiful young Jewish woman with like massive amounts of hair that sort of matched my hips. And I was just, I made my way through the world as this like very big, vibrant person. I actually lived in Israel for a very long time, and it was who I was. Every time I dieted and went to one of these programs, I ended up losing maybe 20, 30 pounds, but then I would have like bouts of bulimia because I was really restricting my food and just totally focused on food all the time and writing it down in a journal and just, oh my God, the calories, the points, this, that. It was just, is this crazy? That doesn't work for me. And I would just like rebound so fiercely because I would be like so fucking hungry. There's no other way to say it. I would be so fucking hungry because I was restricting so much and not eating from what I now know is my Ayurvedic dosha, how I should have been eating. So then I would just totally binge on, I remember, the brand of cookies, the type of ice cream, bread, challah, which is like amazing, and like fresh butter and like stuff that I wouldn't allow myself to have. And then I would be so sick, I'd have to throw up. So there was a whole nother side to the bulimia, which you mentioned, you read the part where I said I had a lot of boyfriends. So I think there's a whole nother side that I'm trying to sort of parse out in writing some memoir pieces of men and sex. And just sort of that went along with bulimia. And I look at being bulimic as it's sort of like pitta dosha, where if people don't know the mind body constitutions of Ayurveda, vata is air and space, pitta is fire and water, and kapha is earth and water. So I look at pitta as the heat of pitta, just building, building, building. And then pitta lashes out somehow, yelling at somebody, ruining a relationship, trashing the house like a fire breathing dragon burning down the village. And then they're like, oh, I feel better. And they walk away and they have no idea of the havoc they have wreaked on the whole world around them. And that sort of felt like what would happen to me when I would be building up to a binge and then purging would be like getting rid of all that fire. And then I felt better. But that was also sex for me as well. It just was another type of release. So there was a lot of sex and there was a lot of binging and purging. And I think they went together. And I've never heard that before and I've never read that before. But for me, it just went hand in hand because sometimes if I was in a situation where I wasn't able to purge, I would go fuck somebody. Basically, because it's so easy for a woman to go in, especially in your 30s. You just like go and you just go have. This was, in the 80s and 90s before there were apps. Like you had to like go somewhere and meet somebody, like at a
Go
shopping
sit
mall.
at the bar or the library.
Exactly. Well, you know what? Something did happen at a library once. That's true. That
Okay,
was
I'm gonna have to give a warning at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, well, in the stacks, quiet stacks. I was at the University of Maryland. That happened. But, so you had to go out and do this, and it was another way of release. It's so interesting. So I stopped being bulimic when I was 32 years old. Someone asked me once, how did you stop being bulimic? And I was like, I don't know. And I was like, I was 32 and my dad just died. And then it was like, my dad just died and I stopped being bulimic. What was that?
Wow, what
Yeah,
is that?
yeah. So there might have been like
Oh,
some guilt and I don't know what, and shame.
I don't want to psychoanalyze on this show, but did you have a good relationship with your dad or not so good?
No, my dad was a very difficult person. He was a refugee of the Holocaust. They escaped. He was
Mm.
not in a camp, thank God, but a lot of other relatives were and were killed in the Holocaust. But my dad was able to get out in 1938 with my grandparents and some cousins and came to New York, but he sort of carried that Holocaust mentality in a way with him that he was a sort of a depressive And I was the third child of three girls, and I was a very happy, carefree, run around the neighborhood naked girl. And that drove my dad crazy. And he
Mm.
used to call me a dreamer as if it was a criticism. And I heard dreamer as like, awesome, I'm a dreamer. I can make anything come true. And I lived my life very
Cute.
freely. Yeah, totally. I was like, dreamer. So I lived my life very free. I moved away from home for college at 18, and then I moved to Israel when I was 22, and then I was just gone. And I think my dad, for a long time, resented the fact that I could live so freely. But when I look back on it now, I realize what a gift. Like I'm one generation away from the Holocaust, and the life I've made blows my mind. I don't even understand that sometimes how that happens. But there was something about my dad's death that was freeing. So I must have held on to something, when he was alive.
Interesting.
He was only 70 and I was only 32. So yeah, I'm looking at it. I don't exactly know the answer. And that's in your life is to take a look at these situations to figure out what's going on. Yeah. So when I was 32, after my father died, I went on a silent meditation retreat. I had already been a meditator and a yogi. Which a yogi. I was a girl who did yoga in people's living rooms in Tel Aviv. I call myself a yogi. So in Israel, before or after the army, many, many Israelis go to India or
Mm.
Thailand, and they come back to Israel and they have all this knowledge and the smattering of Sanskrit and the mantras and so on. And I was really, really drawn to that. And even though Judaism has its own beautiful spirituality and Kabbalah and other little like secret, things that can happen, beautiful rituals and so on in Judaism, but I was very drawn to this even more foreign situation. And I did learn yoga in my 20s and meditation and chanting and so on, literally in the living rooms of, Jewish hippies. And so I decided to go on a silent meditation retreat to kind of figure out what to do next because my father did leave me an inheritance and I was so young and I was like, and that man is dead, who was really hard to handle. What comes next? I mean, that was a huge pivotal moment, of course. And so I went on a silent meditation retreat to the Gaia House, which is in England, in southern
Mm.
England. It's connected to Spirit Rock in California and Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts. And so that was the beginning for me of about a decade or more, or a dozen years of going to silent meditation retreats. And of course, doing my yoga. And I moved back to America after my dad died, which is another like, wow, I isolated myself for a decade and then I moved back
Yeah.
afterwards. And I started this whole life that was based on yoga and meditation. All I did in Baltimore was go to Iyengar yoga classes and Shambhala meditation, which in the 1990s, that was the only thing available in Baltimore. One yoga studio, one place to
Wow.
meditate with groups. Yeah, like 1996.
That was not that long ago. I mean,
Right. Well, it is kind of like almost 30
years.
years ago.
I know, but still to go from that to where we are in 2024, like, whoo, a lot happened in 30 years.
Amazing. I know. And that yoga studio closed during COVID, but Stan Andrzejewski, who was the man who owned it, was a really amazing Iyengar yoga teacher who had never been to India. It was just incredible. But so Iyengar was my foundation for everything, and Insight Meditation was my foundation for meditation. And I still love Iyengar yoga. And I feel like I've made that practice sort of my own with a
Mm.
million other types that I've studied. No offense to any yoga teacher out there, but I cannot go to a yoga studio that has music or mirrors
Mm.
because Iyengar never had that.
Yeah.
Or hot yoga. You're with yourself and your body and your breath and your alignment. And you have a teacher that has studied for years, and they come over and make one small adjustment, and the whole body opens up and sings. And I don't find that in Anusara yoga or other type, or like the fast yoga, or people who've taken a weekend and gotten some credential. And so I'm a purist, I guess, in that sense. But There is nothing like that. And, having a yoga teacher throw you in a headstand in the first class, my goodness, in Iyengar, you would spend weeks and weeks and weeks working up to a headstand.
Or months or years. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the way I learned. And so I love that. But anyway, so we know yoga and meditation are sister sciences of Ayurveda. So finally, when I was like 44 years old, by that time I had used my inheritance wisely to open a bookstore, a metaphysical bookstore in
Mm.
Baltimore, which I had for 10 years called Breathe Books. And it was just a beautiful bookstore hub of the community of all the new age stuff. I opened in 2004. But on my shelves, I had books on Ayurveda, which I had learned about from Deepak Chopra seminars and things, and his old books like, Perfect Health and so on, Angel's Body, Timeless Mind, books I'd read of Deepak's in the 90s. And I was like, Ayurveda, I'm about 240 pounds. And this book tells me that I'm kapha dosha. I have too much kapha, too much earth and water. And I look around and I see that's totally true. I nest, I have all my stuff. I love to
Mm.
swim. I love being immersed in water. My whole life, people called me like Earth Mama. Like I looked like that. I was kapha dosha. And so I saw everything I love to eat is creating more kapha in my body. All the heavier foods, the pastas, the breads, even things like
Very.
cucumbers and tomatoes, things that have extra water, things that are sour, yogurts, even though I'd been a vegetarian since I was 16, but I call myself a pea vegetarian, pasta, peanut butter, and pizza. That did not help the situation any, right? And so I decided I was going to go to the Chopra Center in California in 2006. I hopped on a plane and I went to California for 10 days to Carlsbad. There's no longer a Chopra Center. That whole era is over. So you can't go. I'm sorry, but there's other places to go. But I did the program called Perfect Health. And they did all these Ayurvedic treatments on me, oils, pounding, even like, singing bowls and sound and meditation and chanting and yoga. And I felt like I was pristine when I left there. Like during the massages, I felt like years of cookies flying out of my body. And it's
Mm.
such a more complete way than bulimia ever did. This was felt like
Uh,
holistic and beautiful. And I came back home and I was like, this is amazing. What do I do next? So I did two things. One, I signed up for their program to become a practitioner in Ayurvedic certification. And then I found Amadea Morningstar, who I dreamt
mhm.
about last night, I have to say, which is so wonderful. So Amadea was doing a program at Kripalu, a cooking class, and this was early 2007. And I signed up immediately. And I went to Kripalu and I met Amadea. At that point, it was about 4 months after I began practicing an Ayurvedic diet to reduce my kapha. And I'd bought, everything, mung beans and turmeric, cumin, coriander, the whole thing, curry leaves. At that time, there was no Instant Pot. I bought a pressure cooker, which
Mhm.
scared the shit out of me because that thing could blow anytime. I started cooking Ayurvedically, eating Ayurvedically, doing Abhyanga every day, doing all the massages, the oil massages every day, and doing my meditation, doing a more vigorous type of yoga. And I lost quite fast 30 pounds and I lost 80 points on my cholesterol. My cholesterol went from 280 to 160, however the math worked out.
Wow.
It was incredible. And then I further lost eventually 60 pounds, which stayed off all these 15, 20 years later, whatever.
And can I read a little bit about what you also wrote about that period of time?
Sure.
I was exhausted. I was truly overweight at nearly 220 pounds. In August of 2007, I led a group on my first sacred site tour of India. It was a wonderful trip, but I felt so heavy, so stuffed, not only with food, but also with thoughts, plans, ideas, and desires. Tell us about that because I think many people, when they're looking to feel more comfortable in their body, they don't understand that part of Ayurveda, that it's not just food. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So all the doshas, they affect the mind and the body and the emotions, which I now know, but I don't know that I knew that exactly then. Kapha in particular can just really overwhelm you emotionally. And you might have all these ideas and desires and thoughts and feelings, but you become inert. You become so stuffed and heavy that you're just like on the couch and you can't move and you can't make decisions and you can't make things happen. But I could see them. Like I knew that was out there and I had to get there somehow. We know that Vata dosha, with all that air, wind, and space, is sort of like doing this and doing that and creating plans and being spontaneous and starting that project and this project and not finishing things. And then, Pitta is so fired up. They just A to Z in a minute. They just get it all done and they're just very, very motivated in that way. And Kapha is just like, oh, that's great. Let me have another bowl of ice cream. So I learned that reducing kapha in the body also reduced kapha in the mind. I had treatments. Like I had panchakarma at the Chopra Center, but also I went to Dr. Duyard in Boulder, Colorado, and had a couple weeks of treatment there, which was incredible. And then Dr. Ladd, he was in Albuquerque at the time and a panchakarma there several times. And they do these treatments for removing kapha, which were so profound. I remember having the netrabasti, where they pour ghee into your eye and you sort of have like chickpea flour donut around your eye. So ghee goes into your eye and your eye is open and you keep blinking and it goes deeper and deeper into your brain. That particular treatment helps you see more clearly, right? It gets rid of kapha in the mind. Ridbasti on your chest, where warm oil is poured onto another donut thing on your chest and it opens the heart. All these treatments that I had, which were just melting the kapha away until I could see clearly and feel clearly. And even when I was losing the weight, I sort of was mourning myself. I was mourning the girl that I was. And I
Mm.
allowed myself to feel that. So my natural, exuberant, enthusiastic self would sit on the couch and say, wow, I am feeling sadness. I am feeling like, how much time did I waste and money did I waste on being bulimic? And, all this time wasted on thinking about my body and, all the men I had sex with, like, what was all that about? And instead of eating a pint of ice cream or a box of cookies, I sat with the feeling and I
Mm.
saw it didn't kill me. and, and I saw that I could just get up the next day and go to my bookstore and things would be okay. And so the kapha started to melt away everywhere, everywhere
Wow.
in my mind and body.
And your house,
Um,
I imagine, like all the pack rat comfort items,
Oh,
all.
it's so true. I'm not sure if I wrote that, but I started to get rid of all my size 22 clothes, and size 22, then size 20, then size 18, and size 16. I was like, I'm never going back to that. And I did. I cleaned out so much stuff. I cleaned out my bedside tables, which were full of crap, of past relationships and all sorts of junk were in the bedside tables. And this is another long story. I won't go in the whole story, but emptying all that out of the mind and body, the closets and the bedside tables, what happened? An amazing man walked into my bookstore in 2008 and I married him. And he filled up the closets and the tables that like it needed to create space in my heart and my mind and my home for this incredible man to walk into. We just celebrated 14 years married, 16 years together. So it was just like a Kafic little Ayurvedic fairy tale there.
In the space, we don't understand. People who aren't into yoga and Ayurveda don't understand that the whole goal is to get that space so prana can flow and life force can enter.
That's what it reminds me of the Iyengar yoga. I just remember teachers coming by and just putting their hand on my spine, their finger, and just lift your spine.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I have the chills. What
Yeah.
happens when you open up like that and you create that space? The
Mm.
prana, it's amazing.
So, anyone listening, the start would be to maybe try some panchakarmas, maybe work with an Ayurvedic practitioner like yourself. And then what about maintenance? I think so many people have had success in something and then they fall back off the wagon. Like, how did you maintain it then? You said you got rid of the 22 size clothes, then the 20, then the 18. You said, I'm not going back. How did you maintain it?
Oh gosh. For me, I went head first. I did like a pitta person does, which I now know I'm kapha pitta, but now I'm in the vata stage of life post menopause. But that's another story. But I went head first, which I do not recommend to my clients. I ran into it 100%. I got rid of all the bad food. I never say that. All the food that wasn't cough-genic, I got rid of in my house. And I was just ready. I was in my mid 40s. I was just totally ready for this to happen. And I had these like 2 decades of yoga and meditation behind me.
Mm,
So the yoga and meditation were just like waiting for the Ayurveda to come into that space. But I do tell people to take baby steps. I tell people don't do what I did
mm,
because I'm a 1 in a million situation that was able to keep the weight off all these years. And I don't even think about the 200s anymore. And so, I mean, it just becomes your lifestyle and you feel so satisfied with Ayurveda, yoga, and meditation, the combination of all three together, you feel a deep sense of satisfaction. I'm not hungry. I'm not yearning for anything. I understand how to create my life Ayurvedically. My husband embraces all of that as well. So we have a very, very beautiful Ayurvedic home and lifestyle. Also, Vastu Shastra, which is from the Vedas. Vastu, it's like feng shui, but from the Vedas. Our house has been Vastu'd. When I had my store, it was Vastu'd. Michael Mastro, who is this great Vastu master, he's done all my stuff. We sort of live that way. When you set yourself up, slowly, slowly, when you begin to set yourself up for your dosha and you also start to live seasonally, one of my books is called Seasonal Self-Care Rituals. When you begin to live with the seasons and you realize how connected we are to the world outside of us, we're not alone. You're not just like this little being frustrated and trying to make a go of it. We're part of this. I'm looking into the woods now in front of me. We're
mm,
part of this great, vast ecosystem. And we have to bring ourselves into harmony with that ecosystem in order to feel satisfied and secure and safe in our chakras. I do a lot of chakra work as well. I've written some passages with Cindy Dale in her chakra books, and she's amazing. But looking at the connection of the root chakra and vata and the sacral chakra. And so when you look at those connections with the doshas, you can learn how to heal yourself through your chakras, through your yoga poses. There's yoga poses for every dosha, heart opening poses for, pitta and child pose and so on to make you feel safe for vata, and more vigorous yoga poses for kapha. It's all there. You can
mm.
create your whole lifestyle there, and breath work. We have all of our different breath work for pranayama for each dosha. So there's so many tools and they're just so easily accessible. When I began, there wasn't all this stuff in YouTube. I
I
couldn't look up
know.
Bhastrika breathing on YouTube. I don't think I could then, but now I send my people links to all this stuff. And so slowly, slowly, you see all the anchors and support that you can have. And then it becomes your life. And also, Ayurveda and yoga meditation, very forgiving. You can stop and come back. We're very resilient. It's not 100% all the time.
Yeah.
You can make these choices. Like today, I am going to start my day with hot water and lemon. I am going to do Abhyanga, the body massage. And tomorrow I might not. And
Yeah.
that's okay, you
Yeah.
know? So,
I love that. I love that,
um,
that there's room for being gentle and not being a perfectionist,
I'm so far from being a perfectionist, I think. It's about like being forgiving and
Mm,
loving yourself. During COVID was a very difficult time for everybody, and sort of everything dropped away. Like I couldn't meditate. It was crazy, right? And we ate so much. I gained like 10 pounds. We like ate chips and ice cream like we were going to die, right? Like we
yeah.
were so scared. We thought
We thought we didn't have to go out of the house anymore, so we might as well have fun.
and we did. And then we looked at each other, my husband and I, and we were like, okay, this is not helping any.
Enough is enough.
Right, right. And so we started a new exercise routine, and now we actually go to Pilates, and we have a swim
Mm,
spa where we can swim. And, we have built our lives, and we did this during COVID so that we could take care of ourselves better. But we forgave ourselves. It wasn't like, oh shit, look what I did. I'm going to keep eating like this. And it didn't feel good,
yeah.
you know. after a while. In the beginning, it did,
Mhm.
but then, but then it didn't.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that personal journey with us because I know a lot of people listening are also in the same boat, all that you described at all different places on that journey. And I just really appreciate you sharing something so personal because a lot of women, especially, we don't like to talk about our weight and our relationship with our body. And I think from my perspective, what I just heard, like, I'm like, yeah, I need to recommit to, I've been eating a lot of dairy, right? And I have a kapha imbalance. So I need to recommit and say, yeah, maybe not so much dairy, not so much wheat, some of these more.
Right. I have to say, when I did lose my 60 pounds, I completely cut out dairy, wheat, and sugar.
Yeah.
Not in fruit, but just like other kinds of sugar. And I did that for about 2 or 3 years. But then I slowly incorporated that back into my life. And I haven't gained the weight back. So it's not like everything is forever. I really feel, and other Ayurvedic practitioners might disagree with me. I don't know, it's like, but this is how I live. This is sort of like what I call like American Jewish Ayurveda. This is like a completely different situation. At some points, I decided that bread really is amazing. And when you have very good organic, bread with nuts and seeds and so on, it's very healing and it
Mm,
can feel really good. And not to chastise yourself and think you're a horrible person because you ate bread or a bowl of pasta.
yeah.
It's like, no, you're just alive and you're living and everything in moderation and you feel when you're full and you take a walk after a meal. There's so many beautiful things in Ayurveda that we incorporate. Walking after a meal reduces your sugar,
Yeah.
by like 90% and increases your digestion. I can't not walk or do some activity after a meal. I feel horrible if I don't. And so
Mm,
a little thing like that, a little 10-minute walk. There's so many little Ayurvedic tips and things that are in all my books that you can incorporate and that not feel bad about yourself. There's just too much happening in the world, right? Too much to
too
think
much.
about. And to add feeling negatively about yourself and self-loathing, I want people to love themselves. I want people to be happy with who they are. I used to say in my meditation class, you've got to get over your own shit so you can help someone get over their shit. That's the whole reason why we're here. Help someone else get over their shit. And one of my people said they're going to make a baseball hat that said that, but I never got one. But it's like,
Need a
but
t-shirt with that.
yeah,
On
but
the
it's
front, get over your shit, and on the back, so you can help other people get over their shit.
because isn't that what it's about?
It
It's
is.
about
It truly is.
community. It's about seva. In Judaism, we say it's tikkun olam, which means to repair the world. We
Mhm.
get all mired in our world. And I know that some people have serious mental illness and other things that are happening. I understand that. But the sooner that we're able to move, even a little bit away and just smile at the barista or the cashier or just, offer a hand to somebody crossing the street, even those little tiny steps of helping people makes your heart open a little bit more each time.
Yeah.
And then you're at your point where, wow, my whole point is to help others and it helps me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. So I want to go back to one thing that you said. You said your kind of special sauce is this American Jewish Ayurveda. That ties into a question I have that I know you were on the board of directors with NAMA, the National Ayurvedic Medical Association. And I'm just curious, why did you decide not to be on the board, if you don't mind me
Yeah.
asking? Does it have to do with this, like, being relevant in modern times in the real world? When I heard American
Yeah.
Jewish Ayurveda, I was like, oh, that she's taking it into like right here, right now, as it flows through you.
That's funny. In one of my first meetings with Amadea Morningstar, and I had her sign my book, the Ayurveda cookbook, which was the seminal Ayurvedic book for years, for decades. She wrote in my book to Susan, here's the Ayurveda for Jews.
Oh,
Way back in
I love
2006
that.
or 7, she wrote that. I love her. So, yeah, all respect to everyone who has built NAMA. I joined NAMA in about 2007 when I began practicing. So, way back in the day when it was still like
Mhm.
just lightly organized, and read people like Debbie Mueller and others who were involved in it. It seemed really, really inclusive and inviting everybody in, all sorts of practitioners. And then Hillary Giravoltis, who came on as the director, and she was phenomenal from Kripalu. And bringing sort of this really deep sort of the traditions, giving it a Western voice. I went on the board under Hillary, and then
Mm,
Hillary decided to leave after many, many years, and a management company took over. So I don't exactly know where things stand now, but the personal touch was gone. And I was a member of the board when this happened, and I sort of felt like we were kind of railroaded into this situation of letting this managerial board take over without doing a national search for a director for the organization. And so I feel that it's, become a business, and they also started trying to push through this doctor of Ayurveda. And I found that to be very scary. So people like me, who just have a bunch of certifications, could apply to be called doctor, which I think is very dangerous. And I specifically have on all my forms people fill out, I am not a doctor. But there
mm,
are Americans like me calling themselves a doctor of Ayurveda because they have enough hours and so on. They don't know anything about being a doctor, a real doctor, a Western doctor. When you call yourself a doctor in America, people think you're a Western doctor. The people who have studied Ayurveda have trained in hospitals and have clinical training. They call themselves doctors. That's a different story. But when we started to apply this to Westerners and allopathic practitioners, I just thought that was a very dangerous precedent. And that just really sealed it for me. I was like, I don't want to be a part of this association because I think it's false advertising. And all that being said, in all my years as an Ayurvedic practitioner, nearly 20 years, not one single person has ever asked me if I am NAMA certified, if I belong to NAMA, what is NAMA, nothing like that. So I think that it can be really good for some people to get what they call the PACE credits and become certified through NAMA if they feel they need that. My particular place where I studied Ayurveda in the very beginning with Deepak Chopra, although Deepak is an advisory board member, they didn't
mm.
recognize my certification as an Ayurvedic practitioner from the Chopra Center because the Chopra Center didn't really recognize NAMA. They never applied to be accredited. And so even though I was on the board, I've never been like certified as a professional through Ayurveda. Even though I've written three best-selling books on Ayurveda, I've never been considered a professional. And yeah, so I stepped off the board, and I see now there are more Americans on the board, which is great, but I still believe they're being run by this corporation. And I find that, disconcerting. And I hope they find their
It,
way, but I don't know
it
that I'll be a NAMA member in the future.
is the corporation part of what's driving licensure, or is that a different group?
That is a different group called NAMAC. I feel like it's probably all under that group now, but NAMAC is the one creating the tests and the certification. We worked on it when I was on the board. There's a liaison with the US Government Board of Education to get these certain universities and whatever recognized under them so that they can apply for licensure. But if you ask me, I don't know, it could happen in 20 years, but I don't see it takes so much with the Board of Education to get that recognition that I don't think that we're up to the task.
The
People
reason
are going to
I
hate me
ask,
for this, but I'm sorry. It's just what I
well, the
see.
reason I ask is because it's so parallel to the discussions we're having in the yoga therapy world with the International Association of Yoga Therapists. And, exactly what you said, we came in and we had this almost family-like environment where we were connected to the teachings and to each other and like really, really heart-centered. And then it felt almost like a management company came in, although it isn't technically that. That's kind of the vibe that happened. More corporate, less empathy, less connection with the members. It just had this different feel all of a sudden. And I don't want to be a part of that. I want to go back to sharing these teachings with each other. And maybe that's not the most financially viable way to do it, but I personally don't want to sell out to a top-down model of hierarchy and rules and laws and all the things that are going to actually take away the essence of what we're doing here. So I'm like you, like nobody's ever asked me if I have a certification, so I don't want to be part of that.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
Ah,
And it's up to the client who comes to you or comes to me. I think that they have to look into it and say, oh, she's been around for a really long time. I Googled her, Binged her, or whatever, and I found out she's got a very deep history in Ayurveda, so I trust that. Or for you, for yoga therapy. And if somebody goes to someone who just did a weekend course at Kripalu or, got us whatever, went to India for a month and studied at Shivananda, and they come back and they say, I'm a yoga teacher, I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner. It's really a lot up to the client who's coming to you to do the research, to understand who you are. And no matter what your certification is, I
Yeah.
think it has to go both ways.
Mhm.
So, having something like NAMA or the yoga therapy organization, saying, well, you should not go to a practitioner unless they have this certification. It's just not true. It's just not true because their certifications can be gotten in so many different ways, and some of them are just really not valid.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, there's not a lot of quality control. This is not to bash NAMA or IAYT. This is just like spitting facts.
right.
Like I think both of those organizations have done really great things in the world, and I'm actually appreciative that they exist. And I think what many of us are coming around to is that it's our personal embodiment of the skills that we have learned and tried out and connected with people. Like that's what's eventually going to be healing, not the piece of paper.
Oh, you just made me think. I had the most amazing yoga experience a few months ago. So I live in Baltimore, but my husband and I have been looking to move to Asheville, and we've been going to Asheville quite a lot. And of course, we're heartbroken for all the
Mm.
friends, and our move is on hold. But we were in Weaverville, which is just outside of Asheville, and a friend of mine took me to a yoga class there, a yoga studio upstairs in an old building with a million windows. The yoga teacher, I can't think of her name right now. I'm assuming she was about 70 years old. It was one of the best yoga classes I ever had. She was the embodiment of yoga, right? She's probably been doing yoga for 30 or 40 years. I had such trust in her when she came to me and, adjusted my squat or she do it. I just felt like I had so much faith in this woman who has all these years. I don't care where she studied, I don't care anything. It was amazing. I want to move to Weaverville so I can go to her yoga classes
Wow.
all the time. I mean, that's a yoga teacher, right?
That's right.
That's the embodiment of the spirit of yoga who's there to help you. And you feel it when you walk into the room, just the gravitas of a real yogi. And that's beautiful. I much rather have somebody like that than somebody who just, pulled a certificate out from somewhere and is throwing me into a headstand or a handstand within the first 5 minutes of a class. Because that's not yoga. That's
No.
not yoga. This woman brought me in union with my body,
Mhm.
and that's yoga, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Susan, if people would like to work with an experienced practitioner like you and they have felt connected to you today, I have your website that I'm pulling up here, which is www.susanweiss.
WeissBollen.com.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I'll put
just
that
my
in the show
name.
notes.
Thank you. Yeah, and I've written 3 books. The Ayurveda Beginner's Guide, which has the one that's in the center there, that has sold maybe 100,000 copies. Seasonal Self-Care Rituals from Simon and Schuster, and my brand new one, the Ayurvedic Home Remedies, which is in Whole Foods and around the country in Whole Foods and everywhere you can buy books. And it was fun. The Seasonal Self-Care Rituals also ended up in Anthropology. It's fun where your books end up. It's so
Just
fun. But
such beautiful books too.
yeah.
They are sacred to even hold them.
Oh, that's so sweet. I've heard that before. My publishers have treated these books with such care. I'm so proud of them. But these books are research and me putting it together and interpreting Ayurveda in my way, which seems to resonate with people, which is a very, the Western way, but also forgiving and allowing for lifestyle. Like, when you have panchakarma in India, usually your doctors don't even tell you what your dosha is or what to eat
Mm.
when you go home and so on. But here I have to be very hands-on and I love that. So I do that for people. because it worked for me so well. So these books are available everywhere, all your local bookstores and all over the world. They've been translated into many languages also. So I do Ayurvedic consultations. I also teach creative writing. I started doing much more with creative writing and memoir work during COVID. And so my trips that used to be sacred site trips are now called Write and Roam. We just came back from Bhutan and the Himalayas, which was an incredible journey. We're going to Iceland next week. I've done 2 retreats in Iceland so far, and I have one coming up early next year here in the States in West Virginia. In 2025, I'll do Iceland because we have that all set, but I'll do 1 or 2 more in the US as well, and Bhutan again in 2026. So we do writing. You don't need to be a writer. I lead you through the practice, but it connects you to your body and to the land where we are. It creates community. It's such a beautiful way to travel, is to have these hour or 2 of writing every day before we go out and we go tripping around the countries to sacred
Wow.
sites and nunneries and monasteries and waterfalls and caves, and it's just so beautiful. I love my life. I've just created this stuff and everybody comes. It's so fun. I have a Substack newsletter, which you can sign up for, and that goes out a couple times a month. So you can sign up for that. It's free, or you can pay if you want, but it's also anyone can read it for free. And yeah, and I do consultations. So I do my consultations by Zoom. So I do work with people all over the world in that. So yeah, I'm here for you. I want to make you happy.
Yes, you are. I mean, the levels of offerings from ordering a book off Amazon to personal consultation to let's go to Bhutan together. I mean, I love that ladder of connection.
Thank you. And of course, you should buy the book at your local bookstore
Of
or look
course.
there first, or bookshop.org, which benefits your local bookstore, but they are all available on Amazon around the world as well.
Well, thank you, Susan, for being with us today. It's such a pleasure to have such an authentic, wonderful human. I'm just so pleased to meet you and hear your story. And thank you for your honesty about the difficult questions that I asked for today.
Oh, Amy, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm really honored to be a part of your incredible span of work, and you're helping the world. I really think that we're kindred spirits in that way.
Yes, I
Thank you
think
so
so.
much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan, for being with us today. You are vivacious and vibrant, and it was really fun for me to interview Susan. I love people who are super authentic, and not very many people are brave enough to be that authentic. So it really is an inspiration to me when people allow their whole self to come forward and to just be who they are in their essence and let it be seen. And I think Susan did that for us today. And I love that type of interview. So I hope you enjoyed it. We will be in touch. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you for listening to the Yoga Therapy Hour podcast. After several years of beta testing, we are finally ready to build a community around a mobile app, the Optimal State app, on Android Store and in the iPhone store. On this app, we're going to start hosting classes, regular meditation circles, and really start to build a community of yoga teachers, yoga therapists, Ayurvedic practitioners, and healthcare practitioners that want to come together on a regular basis and have a community that is empathetic and compassionate and kind and full of goodness, that wants to grow spiritually together. So come on over to the app. You can download it now, try it for a month for free, and we'll be having regular community online offerings through the app, and we would love to see you over there. All right, we'll see you soon. A special thank you to our team here at Optimal State. We are truly a global family. George Mantuan, one of our executive producers. Adam Satchel, senior media producer and sound engineer from the Philippines. Krishna Panchal, a producer from Canada. Modupe Abdullahi, who does the show notes and is an editor for us from Nigeria. And Peter Morley, who wrote and produced the music for this show, who lives in Australia. Find more about Peter's work at www.zenmusic.biz. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.